Patriotic greetings, Ambazonian people, friends and foes of Ambazonian and Southern Cameroon liberation struggle. Welcome to a special edition of African Hour from the great city of Lowell, Massachusetts, USA. I am your humble host, Fru Nkimben, assisted by my able co-host and technical engineer, Francis Aunkan. The Ambazonian Revolution is one that has been long in the making, long before the immediate spark of clashes with La République du Cameroon about 5 years ago. The artisans of this revolution vary in capability, intellectual, and vision for the means and ways to get the Ambazonian people to their land of milk and honey, Boya. As an activist, observer, and commentator who has followed and educated the masses on this struggle here in America and the world over, I notice with most Ambazonians who are asking questions about the future of the revolution that the revolution seems to be heading to an impasse. Mindful of the fact that in every revolution that ever was, no individual or group ever had the silver bullet to begin and end a struggle of this magnitude. For any revolution to succeed, it has always taken a coordinated effort and strategy. Today, there is need for the Ambazonian people to listen to those voices, i.e., those of intellectuals, to which attention has not been given thus far. The voices of these Ambazonian sons and daughters of the intellectual greed have been drowned in noises, leaving people asking about their role in the struggle. In addition, I note they have been working selflessly in the background while steering clear of the noise making. I am delighted to bring to you an Ambazonian patriot who sits above the current power struggle. He is one of these voices of reason that I bring in this special broadcast of the African Hour, live from Lowell, Massachusetts, to give us insight into the way forward with our revolution. Permit me now to start by introducing Professor Bill Ndie. Professor Ndie was educated in Cameroons, Nigeria, and France, where he obtained his doctorate degrees. The University of Paris 4, Sorbonne, the Institut supérieur d'interprètes et de traducteurs ICIT, the University of Paris 8, and the University of Clergy Pontoise. He has held teaching positions at the Paris School of Languages, the University of Sunshine Coast at CP Downs, the University of Queensland, Brisbane, St. Lucia and Deacon's University in Melbourne, Australia. He is presently Tenure University Professor of Modern Languages Communication and Philosophy at Tuskegee University, Alabama, USA. He has an extensive publishing record of accomplishments with over 58 works in 299 publications. Many of his writings and publications can be found at the United States Library of Congress in Washington, D.C. It is my honor to welcome a brother, an Ambazonian patriot on African Hour, Professor Bill Njie. You're welcome on African Hour.
Thank you very, very, very much, Mr. Nkime. I would like, first of all, to send or bring patriotic greetings to all your viewers from Tuskegee University in the great state of Alabama. Tuskegee University, the home of the Golden Tigers and the seat of Pan-Africanism. I would like to start by thanking you for the generous introduction you have given of me. And I would most specifically single out your news outlet to thank you for exhibiting, for showing the willingness to bring voices that have thus far been drowned when it comes to the struggle for the restoration of the independence of Southern Cameroon's Ambazonian, which was stolen some 61 years ago. As you rightfully note, the revolution for the past 5 or 6 years have been raging. And at the point where we find ourselves, the sound and the fury seem to have turned to noise, with those at the helm of the revolution bickering not in the interest of the people, but bickering for position. They bicker and they ignore the fundamental human aspiration, which is also Southern Cameroonian and Ambazonian. That aspiration and quest is that of freedom. Having said that, your laudable effort to bring to this platform voices and all the parties concerned is something everybody should applaud as we seek to find a way forward, to find a solution to this struggle. I know very well, and from experience, I might beg to say 1 or 2 things before I give you the opportunity to ask me questions if need be. My 12 years of teaching at Tuskegee University has taught me one thing, and that one thing has been the core of my teaching. I teach collaboration. And collaboration is one thing that has been very, very difficult for us as a people to do. And the lesson I can give to anybody when it comes to our struggle is that in spite of the differing factions in this restoration for independence struggle, the factions should place the common good at the center. They can unite in purpose and achieve their purpose before they move an inch to positioning who is who once that mission has been achieved. Also, it is my plea to you that giving me this singular opportunity to talk as one of those voices that has been thus far drowned, you would remember to bring many more voices and voices of intellectuals. With one thing I would caution: intellectuals do not want to be branded. And when I say intellectuals do not want to be branded, it means your outlet should create an opportunity for your viewers to listen. Listening is an aspect of communication equally that people despise, but it is central to communication, because without listening, the rest is noise. That word noise is a very technical term in communication, which means anything that is effective communication. So I would just pause there and say the Ambazonian struggle for the restoration of her independence, which is a struggle for freedom. Freedom is the engine. Freedom is the motor that drives good literature. And the writers of good literature generally aim at liberating the masses. How do they do this? They paint the ugly face of any political mismatch for the dictators to have a look at the ugly face of what they do. We could go on. I'll say one thing, pause. Because the dictator is somebody who ill conceives the fact that pressure, okay, would certainly scare people, the oppressed, to the point where he would reign supreme. By so doing, in a society where people do not react, people don't listen to their writers, because there is no civilization. I'm still waiting to see any civilization that exists without good literature. African civilization survived millennials because of oral literature, oral tradition, tales that were told, okay? But when we get to the point where our literature is buried, oppression becomes a metastasized cancer whose diagnosis would bring in its train fear and problems, which could have been dealt with if this literature was heeded right from the very beginning. So literature, for us here in the US, we know the First Amendment rights, freedom of speech. You cannot deprive people of it, okay? And if you deprive people of freedom, it means you throw out any form of decency in the context. I would narrow it down to what happened in the Cameroons before we started this
Prof,
fight.
very important. Take a pause there. and then you will come back. But I would tell you that, Prof, before we started our discussion, I felt I was in a dark room, and you have just flipped the switch, and guess what? There is light.
Thank you.
The wisdom from you is refreshing. And I would also thank you for that advice, not branding. Prof, thank you so much. I always say I use my platform to invite Ambazonians to discuss issues and not people.
Yeah.
And I always say I pledge my allegiance not to any individual, but to Ambazonians. Because the leaders, to me, are like a revolving door, they come and go.
Thank you.
But Ambazonia, the British Southern Cameroon, that was and that is today, Ambazonia, is the only person that I pledge my allegiance to. Words of wisdom are very rare, and when they fall on listening ears, they become gold. So, Prof, you were just about to open, to explain something about some historical significance, but as you are explaining that, I would like to hear from you your efforts, your silent and quiet efforts around Africa, doing what most people don't know, and taking our struggle to areas and sowing the seeds that are now just like seeds on the ground, but they will bear and people will see it when they are growing.
All right. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk about some of the things I have done. But before I even make mention of that, 5 or 6 years ago, I listened with horror. A gendarme, for those who do not speak French, a gendarme is just a military police. And these are people who get into the job, elementary school education. One of them dared to call intellectual, lawyers, teachers as micro. What he forgot to understand is that those microbes can make or break the whole system. That's what I wanted to point out. But as far as my personal effort is concerned, I have been in this struggle since I was a kid. There are names of true revolutionaries, by the way. They are not out there fighting for positions, fighting for names, because they know their true worth. When I say this, I would bring to mind those listening, the history of this revolution does not date back today. We've heard of the architect of our independence, Concha, Indele, Muna, Jua, all the Samofos, and the rest who sat in the Enugu, in the Eastern House of Assembly in Nigeria. Nobody ever asked who told these guys in 1953 back out of Enugu and found something as soon as they got to Mamfi. Nobody's ever asked that question. But I am here to tell you, I'm the progeny of that individual. And from the get-go, I was brought up knowing our union was nothing but a house of cards that is free. And in my years growing up, I have written extensively about the struggle and written about the struggle at times as if there was a voice, a prophetic voice in me. I don't claim any knowledge of prophecy. I don't want to claim that because my writings just speak for themselves. And I would add that for the past 10 years, every single conference I have presented in and around the world has dwelled on the Southern Cameroon Ambazonian struggle, war, plight. And I could share with you some of those writings. But I think maybe at this point, it is too early. At one point, I will pick one or two of those poems and read them for you, or just excerpts of the writing, read them for your audience to actually share. These are not poems. I didn't wait for this to happen. There are poems that were written 20, 30 years ago, published more than 15 years ago, that are addressing exactly what is happening today. Maybe your audience would really want a teaser. I could give them a teaser.
I would like you to be thinking of this. Our struggle, as someone mentioned, is transgenerational.
Yep.
And because of that, too, the information dissemination, too, is also transgenerational. We have our forebears who lived and know what it was, as you have mentioned. In the British Southern Cameroons, they left Nigeria and came. And after that, you have about two generations now after them. And the generational gap means a lot in this struggle. Maybe you could say something with regards to the generational gap and how it plays into our struggle for independence.
This poem was written in 1987. It is a very short poem. It is titled Baby Ambazonian, and it was published in 2010, inspired being written in 1987. And Baby Ambazonia reads this: was from time immemorial born, was through time and age grown, was of the Federal Republic learned, was of the United Republic dated, and by the La Republique healed, and in death tied to the skilled assassin, since in hiding gone by his wall of soldiers and cannon shield, by the whole white world greeted. Need not emphasize a true story, for all know and none does worry. Poor baby Ambazonian, from your ashes, rebirth is so near. For my belief in this myth has nothing to do with the heath, the end.
I can see the passion that you had in the 80s, and that poem, listening to it, I saw that you must have experienced something and gone through what your audience, my audience, are just recalling an incident that happened to them in our tumultuous journey with La République, and you summed it so well.
Thank you.
I believe every Ambazonian has a story to tell, and you capture it so very well in so very few lines, but powerful. Thank you.
Thank you. We talked about our struggle being intergenerational, and I would like the younger generation, the fighters, those to whom the earlier generation passed the baton stick, and those who are taking on the fight now, understand one thing, which has also been the core of what I do on a daily basis. There is a proverb that with which we are very familiar, but I don't think we actually apply the proverb very closely, that would pay attention to it. And the proverb is no past, no present, no future. That proverb, as simple as it sounds, is to tell us that we should not ignore our past. We should not ignore our elders. Our elders made mistakes. We cannot dwell on the blame game of what our elders did. The mistakes our elders made, if they didn't make those mistakes, we might not even be here to tell the story. And I'm saying this remembering, I don't know whether it was ever documented anywhere, but this is a narrative I got from my father, who is of blessed memory, how in 1966 they met in Yaoundé, all the Anglophone or all the Southern Cameroonian dignitaries trying to protest, and the late Bernard Fonlon told them, please, if we do this, these people can just take all of us and kill us in a heartbeat, but let's play dumb and our children will fight this fight for us. That could be the mistake they made, to allow us to stay in it, because they understood that the survival of the people was better with them being alive and channel this information to their children and their offspring orally. Today, if we know, we are aware of that, of these facts, why would we want to turn around and try to blame them? With the current struggle, we have people who come at the helm, as I mentioned before, who come to the helm of the struggle, and they are not thinking of the collective interest. They're thinking of personal interest. But they should remember, when you're fighting for freedom, you are not fighting for individual freedom. You are fighting for collective freedom. So the question I have for those fighting, do they really have anything that they are willing to die for? Do they just want others to work for them? Are they at the helm of the struggle just to prune the branches of the problem and never cutting the roots of the problem? Do they want us to have other missed opportunities? And to the young people who are coming, they should understand that politicians strive to crush eggs long before they are laid, and that if they want to preserve their eggs from being crushed, they should understand that writers and their writing serve as a mirror of what is happening in society, and that if politicians desire to make of their society geographical prison where they would live at the mercy of the hangman, they should understand that their agitation for freedom, is not only social, it is not only cultural, it is not only spiritual, political, but it is spiritual, and it is a pathway that they should pursue to rid themselves of pain, hurt, and anger towards a dirty and corrupted world. Let me pause there.
Our forebears did what they did without having all the intellectual knowledge that we have today. Prof, you mentioned something that in 1986 that happened, and our Professor Fallon said that they should not react. And I think that those were wise. I will relate that to what equally happened in 1985. I was a party police at the Congress in Bamenda.
Okay.
We met at Community Hall around 6 p.m. with Pa Foncha, Dr. Foncha.
Yeah.
We sat asking him questions. You know, then one was very, very revolutionary and reactionary, and one thing's done. They were asking him about this maltreatment with La République or so, and then we must do something. He looked at us and said, you know what? Go to school. When the time comes, you will react. And that if anything happens now, we will be killed. So you alluded to that by saying that about the serpent. It is easier to kill the serpent in the egg. And I believe, you see, what Pa Foncha told us many, many years ago, I can just liken it to the old saying that what an old man can see sitting down, a young man cannot see sitting at the top of the tree. We have been able to bring down one of the most sophisticated, well-equipped army without any. Had we did this and we done this then, you know what could have happened? So I really believe in the voice of the old, and you said all that information was walked down to us by word of mouth, by stories, and which another wisdom person told me that what you do is what you think, and what you think is what you know, and what you know is what you have been told.
Thank you.
Our forebears told us about who we are. And if you know that you have a culture that is second to none, you will stand up, you will have the courage and determination that you can change the world. So we know our culture, we know where we are coming from, and we know that we are up for a victory, and that is what is fueling us to move forward. Prof, thank you for your wisdom. Is it time to share one of those poems again? And then when you do that, Prof, I want you to think about, you just returned from Africa, from the mother land.
Yeah.
You were honored there. I was so privileged that I saw the video. If you could share some of the little things that you do to advance the struggle, and many of you are out there doing it. I always say that those who are making too much noise and being visible, they are not the true fighters of this struggle. The people who are carrying this struggle, our struggle for independence, are those whose actions are being felt and seen, but you don't see them.
Thank you very, very much for the opportunity.
Also remind my audience that I am talking to Professor Bill F. Ng.
Thank you. This is another poem that was written about 20 years ago. I know 20 years ago we were not talking about this. It described also what will happen within the revolution if not well handled. And in the poem, which is entitled Litany of Lamentations, the poet sits above the political class and he is observing and lamenting, stating everything that is going wrong. And this poem actually holds true to what is happening with our revolution today. And people should listen with a keen ear. And the litany of lamentation reads, not just a vicious circle, I would say a spiral of violence, not just psychological torture, I would say a nation run by thieves, not just crushing youth's dream. I would say killing the larvae before they grow, not just a wall of gangsters, I would say constructed with the bricks of arrogance, not just how to live bawdy, I would say morally uncouth, not just devilishly cunning, I would say satanically sly, not only the smell of their shit, I would say the stench of rottenness, not just like political mismatch, I would say political indigestion, not just misery in squalor, I would say abjection in quagmire, not just legalization of corruption, I would say bastardization of impurities, not just condoning crime without punishment, I would say consolidation of their heinousness, not just a throne and crown in decay, I would say their timeless putridity, not just a king sowing seeds of discord, but I would say dances and rhymes with division, not just clownishly sheepish, I would say gangsterly arrogant, not just sloppily clumsy, I would say a thousand-headed hydra, not just monstrously ugly, I would say a basking shark, not just the flames of passionate hate, I would say unpardonable hellish hate, not just that they can change, I would say they've made up their mind so impervious, not just they won't look back, I would say some men can't just change, not just trapped in their quicksand, I would say misery, poverty, and privation, not just a gang of petty thieves pushed by hunger, I would say highwaymen robbing for greed, not just a lazy, stupid bunch at the helm, I would say a lousy, crazy bunch steering the ship aground, not just a demagogue thinking he's a pedagogue, I would say a coward in demagogic delirium, not just fake politicians and statesmen, I would say convoluted to the marrow bone, not just their disorderly debauchery, I would say chaotic apocalypse now, not just driving the nation into her grave, I would say making of every life in Ambazonia a living hell, not just through blind and questionable greed, I would say through reckless and unthinkable felony, not just by burning and burning with fire, I would say burning and burning to ashes all hopes. When the gangster in chief has to this listen, I would the world ask him, what has he as a lesson learned? Thank you.
After 80, how many years has he learned a lesson?
Well, I don't know if he's learned a lesson or if those who are fighting, copying the same kinds of attitude and doing the same kinds of thing, acting like gangsters, being arrogant, if they've learned their lessons, then they need to listen to the voice of reason telling them in a free world, leaders don't need to be arrogant. Leaders don't need to be satanically sly. Leaders don't need to act like people who are morally uncouth.
Prof,
Yes.
what year was it written?
This poem was written 20 years ago.
You can capture the pain so well. Reading it is more or less like a volcano trying to erupt in you and finding an outlet. And I'm quite sure, just listening, when you wrote that poem, part of you really felt somehow, I mean, after 20 years, and what it can capture what our people have gone through and what we are going through now. Two things that you should be thinking about: bringing the intellectuals together, and as you rightly said, our struggle don't depend on one group or on one individual to move it forward. I looked at it as running a non-profit organization with various committees: the development committee, the finance committee, the marketing committee, and all these committees. So one committee would be really the committee of intellectuals. And that committee of intellectuals can only be formed by intellectuals. So I hope that maybe after this, that you people have been doing something on the ground, and please let the seed that you have sowed flourish now that we have seen all this mess for the past 5 years. I'm eager for you to share your experience in the mother continent. I don't want to mention the country because
no, that's fine. You know, commenting on the other poem, you said something I really wanted. You talked about the poem coming across as a volcano, but there is another poem written around the same time, which I entitled Sleeping Fako. All right.
That's Mount Fako, for the the third or fourth highest mountain in Africa.
Yes, it is. It is a poem in which I see Mount Fako as this spirit that is actually taking pity, calming us down, not to explode. But at the same time, right, when it explodes, all the lava burn the other side of the country and leaves us. All right, I'll not read the poem for now, but I would tell you about what took me to the mother continent. Recently, I was in Congo, Kinshasa, on the invitation of a progressive president, a president that we should all young Africans laud. I'm not saying this because he invited, I'm saying it because of the knowledge of the work he is doing on the ground. He had invited me to preside over a Jew for a Grand Prix, for a literary Grand Prix. And this literary Grand Prix is his idea put together for an award to compensate the children of Africa and their descendants, wherever they may be, who are into writing and who write literature. That's the first thing. The next thing he's successfully done is to make sure that rumba music, which originated from Congo, spread through Brazil and has been all over the world, has influenced Cuban music, Brazilian music, and other music in the world, that the UNESCO recognized rumba as a timeless patrimony which has been recognized. Next, he, in his thinking, said, we Blacks around the world, we are so divided, and at times the division is not so conscious. The United Nations creates an international day to celebrate Africa, another international day to celebrate African diaspora. And he worked hard for the United Nations and UNESCO to recognize the 24th of January every year as the International Day for the celebration of African and African diasporic culture, meaning all the children of Africa would come together that day, celebrate their different cultures, and be happy that they are celebrating their different cultures. And during the celebration of those cultures on the 24th, the Grand Prix will continue. It will be awarded to the best writer. So when I was invited to preside over the jury with knowledge of what he had done to bring us together, to show us what it means to collaborate, what it means to work as a team. I could not help but be there, be part of those that single out that fine piece of literature to proclaim it to the world that this is what Africa and African descendants of the world could produce.
Allocution avant celle qui est très attendue, celle du président en exercice de l'Union africaine.
Dont le jury à prendre la parole pour la proclamation du grand lauréat du Grand Prix panafricain de littérature.
Question.
Président de la République du Congo, Monsieur Félix Antoine Tshilombo Tshisekedi. C'est un grand honneur pour moi, avec votre permission, de respecter le protocole pour être capable de saluer le président de l'Assemblée, le président du Sénat, le Premier ministre, les leaders politiques, tous ici présents. Je me tiens ici à cause des œuvres merveilleuses de notre président ici, qui, en choisissant l'art et la culture et l'héritage, le patrimoine comme étant le fondement de son gouvernement, de son mandat, a assuré que pour la première fois sur le continent africain, nous soyons capables de décerner un prix littéraire qui réunit les écrivains du continent entier. Ceci étant dit, le jury s'est réuni et après réception d'un peu plus de 53 merveilleux travaux d'art et le comité de présélection a fait une shortlist de 5 œuvres rédigées dans la langue anglaise et 5 rédigées dans la langue française. Nous avions 2 groupes de jury. Le jury francophone qui a été diligenté par le professeur Juliel Kalenga et nous avions aussi un jury anglophone. Nous avons délibéré, les œuvres étaient belles et merveilleuses. Le travail exemplifiait la richesse et la diversité de l'Afrique et des cultures de la diaspora africaine. Ces œuvres, comme nous le savons tous, toutes les œuvres ne pouvaient pas être gagnantes. Néanmoins, j'aimerais que nous sachions que la majorité des œuvres en compétition étaient des œuvres qui pourraient gagner n'importe quel prix sur ce globe. Ainsi, ces œuvres ont été réduites en choix à 2. L'une des œuvres est un roman anglophone de Remi Ngamidje et l'audience éternelle de 1 et le titre est un roman francophone de Leeward Osborne, L'aquatique, que j'ai traduit en anglais, Ceux qui vivent dans l'eau. Et on dit ceci. Avant d'annoncer le gagnant entre Ngamidje et Oswald Leeward, j'aimerais, avec la permission de son Excellence, mentionner une chose. Beaucoup a déjà été dit et je n'aimerais vraiment pas abuser de votre temps et le temps des membres de l'audience et du corps diplomatique en réitérant ce qui a déjà été mentionné. Mais j'aimerais quand même attirer l'attention sur le fait qu'en venant au Congo, j'ai réalisé Congo, quand on dit l'Afrique est le berceau de la civilisation, le Congo est le battement de cœur du monde. Et on dit ceci. J'aimerais reconnaître le fait que dans les deux Congos seuls, nous avons 12 organisations littéraires ou associations. Nous pourrions penser à avoir la AAF qui est traduite en leadership, excellence et atelier de formation. Nous voulons reconnaître et m'assurer que les membres de ces associations comprennent que pendant qu'ils écrivent, ils ont un devoir de tenir bien haut le drapeau que vous, Excellence, avez hissé très haut, pas simplement pour le Congo, mais pour tout homme noir autour du monde. Je vous remercie, Excellence, et je vais m'en aller en proclamant le gagnant pour ce premier Grand Prix que vous avez initié. Après débat, quand les choix devaient être faits entre les deux, le jury, de manière unanime, s'est mis d'accord que pendant que le roman anglophone avait tout ce qu'il fallait pour gagner un prix, le roman francophone Les Aquatiques par Leeward Oswald avait un avantage sur l'anglophone. Ainsi, avec votre permission, je proclame Leeward Oswald Les Aquatiques comme le gagnant, comme étant le gagnant de ce premier Grand Prix. Merci, Excellence. Merci, distingué Président du Sénat, Président du Parlement et Premier ministre. Et merci au corps diplomatique. Je vous remercie énormément. Ayez une célébration bénie et merveilleuse de cette journée culturelle. Merci.
There were novels, there were books in contention, and very good books. You wonder why all of these writers, some of them you never hear of, but you don't hear of them, and they do a phenomenal job at putting Africa and African literature on the world. So my struggle in our own case is to make sure that while the other factions are fighting and doing different things, our literature should have a place in the sun. Southern Cameroon's literature, for those who don't know, Google Southern Cameroon's literature. It is my own meek and humble contribution to what is going on. Even if today nobody is reading, well, posterity would know that I did something for my motherland. I don't need to go into my personal struggles with the administration, which is still ongoing.
Prof, before you, could you just actually give us the name of your host in Congo?
My host in the Congo was President Felix Etienne Chilombo Tshisekedi. He hosted me, and I had the opportunity to meet very good people in the Congo. I met with all the top dignitaries, the government, so to speak, Prime Minister, President of Senate, Speaker of the House, and different ministers in different capacities and directors, and even with their university chancellor and university. I met with all of them during my stay there. So I'll thank you for that.
Well, thank you so much. You are really an ambassador of Africa, and also a true patriot of Ambazonian. These are the efforts said that those who pull this struggle ahead are right in the shadows, and that we should celebrate them. And one thing which you said caught my attention so much is like the literary world, leaders like you, writers like you stand a better place to define who we are, because we grew up reading works of art written by Europeans, defining us in their own image and how they want us to look. When we read works of art written by Africans, they make us proud who we are. So I really think that it is very, very important for the intellectual, the literary community to have a powerful and active voice in our struggle. So thank you for gracing the African Hour. It's really an honor for me.
All right, thank you. Just before I go, I just want to add to what you've said. I would like your audience to understand writers are not noisemakers. Writers are pivotal in every struggle because they increase awareness amongst their own. Writers are people who side with the disenfranchised. There might be writers who are panegyricists, meaning praise singers. A majority of writers are people who are generally caught in the midst of crisis. And it is because they are caught in the midst of crisis that they are able to produce works that speak to the situation, to what people are actually living. If perchance they are prevented from writing, they could explode. Writers write because they want to write, they want to correct the wrong that is at the origin of every crisis. These are equally people who are willing to die in the hands of any brutal dictatorial regime. It doesn't matter. You could look at how many writers have died in the hands of such. There are so many. There are people of conviction, and their ideas, the nerves, there are ideas for which they are ready to die. I would plead with your audience, even if you are in this struggle, you don't read any writing by a Southern Cameroonian. Pick any. Don't pick my work. I'm not here for publicity. I have works. I could give names of authors that I have read and presented at conferences, and people were like, wow. Just from the title of a work, Boundaries, it should tell you something. From the title of a work, Homeless Waters, it should tell you something. From a title like A Nose for Money, you should. So those things, I would really end there, but I plead with us and your viewers, please make sure if you are in the struggle to understand it, go beyond the noise that is made by people whose only wisdom is that to get to power and to cling onto it and lead people nowhere or frustrate people even more. I will end on this note, and I thank you for this opportunity. And I look forward to your viewers commenting, giving their feedback. They could ask me questions if they need questions. They could reach out to me, or through you, I will be able to give them a response in the future. Thank you.
Prof, thank you so very much. And I would say that I am a little bit, maybe my audience and viewers are a little bit anxious to see if you have just one last poem that you can share before you go.
Actually, now I'm confused. Let me see if I could get you tell a poem titled "Tell the Oppressors."
No, thank Prof. I want to say thank you for the wonderful presentation. The poems, when you read them and I listened, it seemed as if you wrote them yesterday. To imagine that as much as 20, 30 years ago, you had your finger on the pulse of what was happening in Southern Cameroon. Though back then it was at its nascent form, you basically were predicting what would happen now. The explosion that happened in 2015, you're written it in words. I was especially touched touched by the words, and I have to say, like Powerful said, I want to only hear more. And I'm afraid that just by reading them, I feel like I feel like my IQ has just gone up. Just by attending the African Hour today, my IQ has gone up, and I think I would stop here because the more time I talk, the less time you have to read poems.
Well said.
All right. I'll read more than one. The first poem I want to read is the poem I talked about, Sleeping Fako. I want you to listen very carefully because Sleeping Fako, also a poem written 20 plus years ago, says, thanks for taking pity in your sleep on slippery siblings east of ours, east of the mountain. For they know not your anger can flow to drown their jewel on the littoral. Sleep, Fako, sleep, and wait for our refusal to carry their shit for long. They've made us smell all along in their ignorance. Lords, they themselves with piles of banknotes and stacks on shelf, priding they own us and our land, and calling us Anglos our brand, hoping this in us crushes the cornerstone of our thundering silence, one that has lit in them such pride, like Saul's voice setting birds afly. Fako, puff not in your sleep. Fako, snow not in your sleep. But forget us not the day we say no. Then we would want to see you go, blowing up those on us placing shari, for they think us unfit. But in the horror of your volcano, we'll paddle on your level, our kin, and leave for freedom land, away from Nimbo land, and from your spring we shall drink. So shall sibling, this blink, that your years of dormancy not grant legit to shitocratic reign, grounding a restraint. I will end with what this is a statement to the oppressed and anybody who is meddling in the struggle and feels that we can replace one oppressor with another. They should understand that the oppressor has always had the short end of the lead. They never say. So the poem tell the oppressors, read, neither shall their hearts and fight, nor their daily struggle against our plight and our great child. The cries of the oppressed would echo and echo till they find food. Echo and echo till the oppressors go down the grave with none of them left. Our lungs, the sweeping tornadoes ignite, from whose waves and with joy alive, eyeing our gloom to bloom, transform, hoping all would be tyrant reform. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so very much. And I would also like to thank our viewers, and that if you really we need your comments and also on topics, future topics for discussion. Please also click the subscription button to receive future YouTube videos. And if you want more information, drop an email to africanhour@gmail.com.
No, it's just to thank Professor, and we hope that he will come again and again.
Professor Bill, indeed, my brother, Ambazonian patriot, Pan-Africanist. Please, could you give us your final remark?
Well, my final remarks. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. Something we were so carried with the discussion that there is something I really am dying or really wanted to say to your viewer and to everybody involved in this struggle for the restoration of the independence of the former trust territory of British Southern Cameroon. What I want us to remember is that in every struggle, if misfortune befall some of the revolutionaries and they find themselves in prison, these people should never be ignored, because following the struggle, it is almost like the leaders who were picked in Nigeria and thrown into jail, nobody talks about, or if people want to talk about them, they start negativity about. We should be united in purpose with them. If you look at every revolution, when people like Mandela were thrown into prison, ANC did not go in disarray. If you take the French Revolution, it succeeded not because people were happy that Voltaire was in jail, but they knew Voltaire was in jail. They went and decided to break the deal, to liberate Voltaire and stage the revolution. If our own revolution is a revolution of backstabbing, leaders backstabbing each other, then we are poised to fail. We are poised to fail. And it is so sad that the leaders are so full of their ego that they are not willing to humble themselves and fight in the interest of the common man. People are dying in Bamenda. People are dying. People are dying in Mam. People are dying in Libya. And we should understand that the only way to curb, to reduce pain and suffering is to have a common voice, a common vision. Even if we differ in vision, let's unite behind a common goal. And then we could talk about the vision we have for our country after we have the country. Let's not kill our country even before we have a country, which has been confiscated. I'm not saying we don't have a country. We have a country, but the country has been confiscated. And we are struggling to regain what is ours, not a privilege, but by right. We own that land, start to finish. And it is nobody's to tell us how and in what way we should manage the land. We should decide that when we are amongst ourselves. By being divided, we give our enemy soul to sleep our throat, or we are even. Thank you.
Those sentiments resonate in all patriotic Ambazonians. And if there is no enemy within, the enemy outside cannot enter. Prof, you summed it so very well. I had the Takumben women and the European Ambazonian women in Europe before you came on the show. They resolved to also join in the leadership, and that their pain is just overflowing, seeing babies ripped off, mothers, children, and they are so frustrated with individuals that are fighting for title, for name, and the country is slipping into the enemy's hand. And your sentiments are well grounded in this, what you mentioned about Nelson Mandela. And I believe that in any struggle, the people who have paid the ultimate price, and if La République did not see that our incarcerated leaders were the public enemy number one, that they were doing such a formidable job to rally the international community, and that if they were still out there, their existence will be doomed internally and internationally. That is what they went out after our leaders. And I thought it would be but a rallying cry for us out here fighting for independence and freedom, to be able to use that to unite and put them on the pedestal. But instead, people who live in the comfort in the diaspora are tearing them down. And what message do you give to the international community? That we are serious when our brothers and sisters, 10 of them, are suffering in the dungeons of La République. Then we are fighting about title and ego. Prof, thank you so very much. You summed the sentiments, our sentiments, in a way that I could not even put it so succinctly. And on that note, all my viewers, I say thank you very much for joining me on this special, very, very special edition of African Hour this year, 2022. And my hero, true patriot, Ambazonian patriot, a true Pan-African Professor Bill D. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. You're welcome. And more grace, you, the African Hour.
Thank you very much. And Francis, always there. Program could not succeed without your able mastery handling it behind. Thank you very much.